Okay, so ready for another deep dive.
Always.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
Today we're going to kind of delve into a genre that you might not have even heard about before.
Mm.
It's called Eco-Gothic literature. And we've got this excerpt here, and it kind of breaks down this really interesting category. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So to kind of get us started, how would you define Eco-Gothic? And,
Mm.
what's the connection to like all the stuff we hear these days about climate change and all that?
Well, it's kind of like, those classic Gothic novels like think Dracula or Frankenstein.
Right.
All those spooky settings, creepy castles, eerie moors.
Yeah.
It's like taking all that and sort of, I guess, filtering it through the lens of environmental anxieties and climate change.
Okay.
So instead of just being scared of ghosts and vampires, we're now dealing with the very real horrors of environmental destruction. And they use a lot of those familiar Gothic tropes like the uncanny or haunting or even just the idea of decay.
Interesting. So like using the tools of the Gothic to tell a very modern kind of story, I guess.
Exactly. And I
There you
think
go.
it makes those anxieties we have about the environment, about climate change, that much more visceral, that much more real.
I think for a lot of people, they might hear the word Gothic and think, isn't that a little outdated? Like that's all about vampires and, the 19th century and all that.
Right.
But when you actually start talking about it in the context of what's happening to the planet right now, suddenly it feels, I don't know, it feels a lot more urgent.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not just some dusty old genre anymore. It's speaking to some very real and present fears that I think a lot of us are feeling right now.
For sure. For sure. One of the things I find really interesting about this whole eco-Gothic thing is how it portrays nature,
Hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because on the one hand, nature is obviously beautiful. It's where we go to relax. It's inspiring, all that. But then at the same time, nature can also be pretty terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really key element of eco-Gothic, this idea that nature has this kind of dual nature,
Mhm.
It's both this source of wonder and beauty, but also this force that can be totally unpredictable and completely uncontrollable.
Right.
And it's a reminder that, no matter how much we try to control nature, to kind of bend it to our will,
Yeah.
it ultimately has this power that we can never fully grasp.
It's like that saying, nature bats last.
Exactly.
And speaking of things beyond our control, it reminds me of that book, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. Have you read that one?
Oh, yeah, Annihilation. That's a great example of eco-Gothic.
Yeah.
That whole idea of Area X, it's so mysterious. And it's got this weird sort of beauty to it, but it's also deeply unsettling. Like you're drawn to it, but you're also kind of terrified at the same time.
Totally. And you never really know what's going to happen next in Area X.
Yeah.
It's just this constant, like, threat, but you don't know exactly what the threat is.
Right, exactly. It plays on that very primal fear of the unknown, the things that are lurking out there, just beyond our understanding.
Yeah, it definitely gets under your skin. And you know what? It makes me think about another big idea that pops up a lot in Eco-Gothic. Hubris.
Hmm.
That whole idea that we humans think we can control everything.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge theme in eco-Gothic. And hubris always leads to, well, not so great consequences.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think eco-Gothic really highlights that. We see it time and again in these stories where humans try to tamper with forces they don't understand, and it always backfires.
And it makes me think, like, are we doing the same thing in real life?
Well, yeah, I mean, think about Chernobyl or the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. These were disasters, at least in part, because of this belief that we could control nature, that we could exploit it without consequences.
Right.
And Eco-Gothic kind of takes that idea and turns it into this cautionary tale. It's like it's saying, hey, messing with nature might seem like a good idea at the time, but it could have some pretty terrifying consequences down the road.
So it's not just about reading a scary story. It's about, like, recognizing our own potential for hubris.
Yep.
And, thinking about how that plays out in our relationship with the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a warning, but it's also a call to be more mindful, more aware of our place in the natural world.
For sure. And, I think some eco-Gothic writers, they go even further than just warning us about hubris. Like some of them actually weave in ideas about environmental activism.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not just about doom and gloom, right?
Right.
It's also about finding ways to fight back, to protect the environment.
And I think a really good example of that is The Overstory by Richard Powers. Have you read that one?
Oh, The Overstory. That's a powerful book.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, he does such an amazing job of blending those classic Gothic elements with this really powerful message about the interconnectedness of all living things.
Yeah, and the way he tells the stories of the trees, I mean, it's like they become characters themselves.
Exactly, and you start to see the world from their perspective. You see how devastating deforestation is, how interconnected everything is, and it's a real wake-up call.
It makes you realize that, Eco-Gothic isn't just about scaring us. It's about making us feel like connected to nature
Yeah.
and hopefully prompting us to do something to protect it.
Exactly. It's about using those emotions, that fear, that sense of awe, to inspire change.
Right, right. And that, I think, that brings us to another really important aspect of Eco-Gothic, and that's its critique of how humans exploit the environment. You see this, reflected in these themes of decay and transformation and haunting.
Hmm.
It's almost like those elements are being used to show us that, everything is connected and that if we keep exploiting the planet, there will be consequences.
Absolutely. And those themes of decay and transformation, they also point to the cyclical nature of life and death and how human actions can disrupt that delicate balance.
So it's not just about telling spooky stories for the sake of being spooky. It's about using those elements, those tools of the Gothic, to hold up a mirror to our own actions and our own impact on the planet.
Precisely. And, that's what makes Eco-Gothic so compelling, I think. It's not just entertainment, it's a way of engaging with some of the most pressing issues of our time.
Totally, totally. It's about facing those fears, but also hopefully finding ways to move forward.
Right. And that's the question I'll leave our listeners with. If Eco-Gothic reflects our deepest fears about the environment, what does it tell us about our responsibility to the natural world? What can we do, not just to survive, but to thrive in a world that's changing faster than ever before?
That's a great question. And I think it's one that we all need to be asking ourselves right now. So thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
Of course, it was my pleasure.
Always good chatting. Until next time.
See you then.
Okay, bye.